Yeah, dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Swissbau Architecture Dialogue Lecture and Panel, Real Spaces, Position, Process and Perspective. Dear audience, dear lecturers and panelists, we appreciate it very much to have you here at this interdisciplinary melting point of building and design. Architekturvortrag is a foundation that has been run by a group of engaged architects over the last 16 years. We are the platform for architecture. Our goal is to make contemporary architecture accessible to professional, but also, and very important, to lay people in various formats and settings. Our offerings are mostly free of charge. We are also pleased that this event, since many years, can take place within the framework of this Swissbau Focus arena. This year's theme, Reale Räume, is due to the first biannual Architekturwoche in Basel, which starts next week. This platform for architecture and urban development is an initiative of our foundation, organized under the artistic director, Chrissy Moore. The inaugural edition of Architekturwoche addresses the theme of Reale Räume, real spaces, examining how globalization, digitation, migration, climate change and the pandemic affect daily life and urban space around us. Real spaces we can see and discuss next week on 3 current development sites, the Dreispitz, Bachgraben and Kliebeck. The forums offer the opportunity to discover these developments, sites and exchange views on urban transformation processes within or with various stakeholders on the sites and or in the areas. We have another format called Trouvaille. It's an award given to architects as a commission for the development of non-built intervention in the public sphere. Through a variety of different interventions, the Architecture Week would like to invite the public and architects to perceive the city in a new way. The first Basel pavilion, made of reused building components, will be presented on the Dreispitz site, a temporary open venue whose architecture demonstrates new possibilities for the circular economy. For the open office format that we invented, numerous architecture firms, about 70, open their offices in the city and surrounding to share insights into the design and production of space. The program of our week also includes numerous partner events. Local institutions and organizations contribute to the Architecture Week with lectures, guided tours, workshops, exhibitions, screening, concert and performances. You will get more information on our website www.Architekturwoche Basel or from our organizers, Chrissy and Florina, that are here. Now to this event, I invited 3 courageous and distinguished parties tonight. It's Shelley McNamara, architect and co-founder with Yvonne Farrell from Graftel Architects in Dublin, Amy Perkins and Maria Lizogorskaya from Assemble in London, and Fernando Romero from Free Enterprise of Mexico City. Judith Scholt will moderate the panel discussion after here on stage. We will start tonight with 3 following keynote lectures, and we start with Assemble's founding members, Maria and Amy. Assemble is a multi- and interdisciplinary collective working across architecture, design, and art. Founded 12 years ago to undertake a single self-built project, Assemble has since delivered a diverse and award-winning body of work, whilst retraining a democratic and cooperative working method that enables built social and research-based work at a variety of scales, both making things and making things to happen, what's not the same. Maria's projects range from product and material prototyping to architectural design and organizational strategy. She is currently working on the Material Institute in New Orleans, USA, and developing an arts curriculum and new alternative education campuses for the Luma Atelier in Arles, France. Maria is the Ensemble visiting professor of architecture at the EPFL, and of course, since they are collaborative, they will both come here, so that's the first time that we have two architects speaking and representing one office. Amy is also a founding member of Ensemble, and she was working very early with Ensemble on self-built projects. She worked also for Caruso St. John in London and taught at the Cambridge University and joined Tom Emerson Chair for Architecture and Design at the ETH, where she is still teaching, and also she holds a guest professorship at the EPFL. Please welcome Amy and Maria from Ensemble with Ensemble Material. Welcome. Ciao.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Thanks very much, Christian. As was just mentioned, I was very active at the beginning, did a number of other things in between, and I'm now back doing more work with the collective, again, mainly through teaching. And Maria has been an active member of Ensemble the whole time and has worked on a huge range of projects, which is how we're going to structure the talk as well tonight. So I'm going to talk at the beginning about an early project, and then again at the end about our teaching practice. And Maria is going to whistle through some really interesting projects and how they deal with material. So we started the practice very informally in 2010. And in the beginning, it was about doing a fun project in our spare time, rather than setting up a company. It was born out of a desire to make space in our city, but limited the places and materials that were available. And so we built this project called the Cinerolium, which was in an abandoned gas station on Clerkenwell Road. And it's a name we came up with, the Cinerolium, combining cinema and petroleum. Because we worked together on all aspects of this project, designing both spatial elements, selecting films to show to the public, making popcorn, designing our own costumes. There was also a spectacle element, where at the end of each film screening, we would pull up the curtain and reveal the street to the audience again. The design decisions were based on the available material, what we could beg and borrow, but also on the available space and the available skill within the group. And the level of openness was reduced just enough to make experimentation productive and evolving. And it's a way of working, of defining just enough beforehand, enough to ensure some success, but with enough slack to allow the project to take on a life of its own in an unexpected way. And in this sense, the material we were working with was as much the method for making as the material itself. And designing clear ways of communicating the material intentions was as important as their design.
And since, I guess it's been 12 years now that we've been working, we've worked on a range of projects, and we're going to share just a few which talk about materials. So this is somewhere where material and craft skills are very connected to place, in Tokushima in Japan, where we designed this space for beer tasting for a brewery. And we worked with a lot of local artisans who are specialists in timber work and indigo dyeing. And we also kind of learnt from the kind of raku firing method of ceramics and made the building, but also furniture and smaller scale vessels for drinking. So you can see we had a lot of opportunities to work with amazing makers and produced things which kind of build on that knowledge. This is the space inside. This poetic tea ceremony. Then currently we're working on a project in Arles with the Luma Foundation. And the idea is to try and work with their incredible kind of research capacities, looking at local regional materials that are new and existing. And it's part of like a much bigger project, which you might have heard about. It's like an art park with exhibition spaces and a new Frank Gehry office building and the R&D lab, which is the atelier which we're working with. And so we're designing a new building for workshops, labs, and places for production, but also a garden and kind of storage space. So this is very much kind of back of house building next to all the kind of other exhibition spaces there. So we're working, obviously, in kind of traditional architectural model making, but also prototyping one-to-one materials. And we're collaborating with another practice called BC, who are based in Brussels. And we're testing out kind of using local quarry waste and clay and waste from agricultural production, such as rice husks and sunflower, to make acoustic panels, but also kind of natural insulation. We're trying out a lot of like funky techniques of staining timber, so using algae, which is like a locally recurring organism, which some of you might be drinking in the morning as what's it called? Spirulina, that's it. But it also creates color in textiles and other things. This is just an example of the kind of things they make in their atelier with these ecological plastics and organic materials. But they also obviously, very, very ambitious and kind of trying to take a lot of these products to market and looking at kind of eco-plastics and things like that. So it's been really exciting working with them on developing the building. And so we were kind of working at a range of scales, so kind of details, but also looking at rammed earth and plaster finishes. So this is a one-to-one prototype of a rammed earth wall that is going into the building. And it's using waste from quarries to kind of give it that white pigment. So going to a lot of local quarries. So I don't know if you know the south of France and Arles in particular, but it has a kind of a huge history of Roman stone construction and incredible stone quarries that we've gone on a lot of visits to see. And a lot of stonemasonry skills. And so we're trying to, again, utilize local knowledge and materials and kind of exploring that. And this is another model we made, a 1:10 model of a stone construction that looks at using waste and different types of stone in a column and beam structure. This is another example of one-to-one prototype using stone waste in a composite column and beam structure. Yes, different types of stone, 3 different types of limestone. And then this is another one-to-one prototype of those 3 different types of limestone in a kind of construction strategy, which looks at using every part of the stone. So yeah, the building is on site now and should hopefully be finished this year. And I guess another kind of third strand to this talk is creating spaces for other people to think about materials. And that ranges from kind of children, so Baltic Street Adventure Playground is a space in Glasgow, in Scotland. And that's all about creating a kind of really messy, chaotic space for children to move stuff around, to move material around. It's really not about it looking beautiful or finished or perfect. So I don't know how we'll go with the kind of high design ambitions I've seen in Basel, but yeah, it's an experimental place. Then kind of a more professional space for makers that specialize in wood and metalwork. And it's also an incubator space for young designers who make whatever jewelry or large-scale timber production. On another scale, kind of part of a bigger regeneration project in Liverpool, where we designed housing and new commercial spaces working with a community there who set up a community land trust, which is a kind of alternative model of housing. And with them, we created a workshop making kind of specials for houses. So currently focusing on ceramics, we utilize kind of industrial machinery mixed with kind of hands-on experimentation to create really unusual and varied products, such as these tiles were made for the Venice Biennale in 2018. And another one in New Orleans, an educational space focusing on textiles. And it's really kind of creating a new curriculum, so very much about people in the very beginning of their design journey, learning about how to work with textiles and design and making things. And they are making really incredible things there.
And last but not least, I'm going to just briefly talk about the visiting professorship that we've been running at the EPFL since 2020. And it brings in a lot of these aspects that Maria was just mentioning about the importance of material experimentation and understanding the material that you're working with in order to make design. The studio really was founded on the belief that an understanding of how these things are made brings an intimate engagement with the problems and the possibilities of the real world. And Maria and Joe ran the studio for a year in 2020, looking at stone construction specifically, trying to build connections to contemporary networks of skills and resources in the region. For example, this quarry outside Lausanne, where the students designed and built their own barbecue as a way of learning how to work with stone. And then the strategy of learning through building precedents. So the students, even during the pandemic, showing an amazing effort at designing and constructing these large-scale 1 to 20, 1 to 10 models, sometimes using not necessarily stone, but representations of stone to understand these buildings from across geography and time. And then exploring how the contemporary interpretations of past architectural ideas can support our practice of design in the present. And so this is an example of a model of one of the black houses in Scotland that students looked at. And thinking about how this method of construction was intricately linked to a community, a landscape, an economy, a labor, and transience. And then trying to represent or trying to reinterpret those precedents that they've looked at in detail into their own projects, specific to places such as this one was in Arles. And since, this another example of an interior of a bathhouse, I think. And since 2021, James, Maria, and myself have been running the studio again, with this time focusing on timber and timber construction. And we've been building our collective understanding of its material qualities as an environment, as a resource, and as a material itself, working within places and with people whose relationships with the forest and its cultural, economic, and social life, and to try and help deepen our understanding of it as a material and how to act carefully and intelligently with it. So this is us felling a tree in the Jura Vaudoise, together with the help of the local forester, the local mayor. We selected this tree and chopped it down ourselves. And then using this machine within the forest itself, we turned this kind of diagram into the reality, and then used this as our raw material to construct the process models throughout the rest of the semester, which gave the students a much deeper understanding of how this material really works, especially when it's freshly cut, wet, and full of sap. We reuse this technique because it's so effective of looking at precedent buildings in a very careful way. Again, this is a 1 to 20 model of the Lisbeth Sachs house called Imschliff. And then ask the students to design a large-scale enclosure or hall, something very simple, but something based in that municipality where that tree was extracted from, as a way to kind of tie back the idea of kind of making material back to a place. which the students did with a newfound respect for the material they had so intimately worked with throughout the semester. And the material knowledge and relationships built through this work, both with the studio and the students, I think have begun a new set of long-standing collaborations, such as with this municipality in Butini, where we're currently collaborating with the mayor and the students to revisit their plans for a communal housing project this semester in the village using locally sourced material. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
I think we're 1 minute over.
Thank you very much, Amy and Maria. Quite a different approach to what we've seen today, seeing or going through Basel, where there are more finished spaces. And of course, I like your approach very much. Now we will hear a keynote from a totally different architect, Fernando Romero of Free. He is the architect and founder of a global architecture firm from Mexico City, with offices also in New York, Madrid, and Shenzhen. Free is an active agent in the reconfiguration of site and public space. Free's commitment is to translate historic, social, economic, and environmental contexts into contemporary urban destinations. Over the last 20 years, Free has realized and proposed projects in a number of different countries that encompass different programs and contests. Fernando Romero is recognized as one of the leading architects of his generation with many prizes, and for example, he got the Bauhaus Award and the Best of the Best Red Dot Award. Fernando flew around the world to come here. He is leaving again tomorrow. Please welcome Fernando with Materializing the Invisible. Fernando. Ciao.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. So first of all, I want to thank Christian for this amazing invitation. I'm very happy to be here in Basel. And I put desire to the first slide because I think that everything we achieve in our life is the result of our desire. And after working in Koolhaas in OMA in Holland, I came back to Mexico, to my city, and I tried to learn, and I produced a book of the transformation of Mexico City. And Mexico City is based on a lake, at least in the beginning. The Tenochtitlan was developed in the old lake of Texcoco. And of course, that lake during the last 5 centuries has dried as the city grew. And my first investigation of Mexico City, I realized that the city grew 5 times from the year 50s to the year 80s due to an important immigration. And it was the same, the desire of the people to try to have a better way of living. And this is settlements of people that self-build their own homes. And here you see an image in gray where you see the current Mexico City, one of the most dense populations in the world, with more than 25 million people. And you see that little red dot. That little red dot is the current airport, and it's the gate to the country. And you see in blue what is remain of the lake of Texcoco. And in this animation, you understand the evolution of Mexico City and how, as we grow, we just compress that airport. And during 20 years of planning, we have analyzed how to do a new piece of infrastructure that connects Mexico City to the world. And I was lucky enough to partner with Norman Foster and win the competition for doing the new Mexico City airport. And it's basically a terminal, a new building that will become the gate to the country, in a master plan that was developed with Mitre that enabled us to receive up to 70 million passengers per year in the phase 1. This is the white building that you see there behind me, that has the shape of the X, because the X is very representative of Mexico. We thought that this was a great and the best way to organize the floor plan. So you have all the gates in the form of the X, and that became the symbol of the new airport for the city. We worked 5 years with 500 architects between Mexico, London, New York to develop the project. We developed 10,000 drawings, and we started construction of the project. And the whole vision was to do something that connects with the history of the architecture of our country. Here you see the pyramid of El Sol of Teotihuacan in Mexico. And you can fit precisely that same pyramid inside this space. And for us was that possibility of connecting with the history of our architecture. To do this space also a celebration of the monumentality that was present in our previous architecture. But also to try to do a building that was extremely efficient with the natural resources. So it was the first LEED Platinum airport in the continent. This is a schematic section where you understand the different levels of the airport. So the level of the platform, then the level of arrivals, where you connect with the bridges, and then, of course, departures. And for us was the opportunity to do a building that celebrates also what Mexico have the possibility, not only technically, but also the vision to develop a building that celebrates our diversity, our gardens, our nature. This is a view of the envelope, and for us, the envelope defines the DNA of the project, because it's the envelope that responds to the environment. So we use that envelope to receive the air and inject it through the tunnels to the interior of the building, but also to recycle all the natural resources as water and capture the light for the building. So we work with engineers to try to do extremely efficient building that was a state-of-the-art in terms of its engineering. Of course, investing in infrastructure is an investment for the future generations. It's a possibility to boost tourism, to boost employment, to boost development. And of course, an airport is that piece of infrastructure that is the first image you have of a country. So if you go to China and you see the Terminal 2, you see a building that represents China celebrating the Olympics. And if you go to Mexico City, we wanted to create a building that celebrates that Mexico is aware of the importance of their visitors and the tourism, but is also interested in receive you with open arms and receive the investment in the country. I put this image of the war. This is from, of course, in the 40s. And who will ever imagine that we will see this image now in Europe, right? And this image is also as a result of the desire of somebody that is still in power in Europe. And these maps just show the dictatorships in the world that still remain in power. And we are not a dictatorship. We are a democracy in process of becoming potential dictatorship. We are a yellow country where a president can arrive and can simply stop an airport that was on construction simply because he thought that was too expensive. And he decided to do the airport in another location, and it's already built and doesn't have any flights. So the reality is that investment on infrastructure is an opportunity to reduce poverty because you create the social development, sustainable social development. So we are convinced that this project will happen no matter what, sooner or later, because it's the only solution to connect Mexico City. The next idea is about cities, because I'm designing one city, so I want to share with you the experience. And of course, as a young architect, when you see Le Corbusier and you visit Chandigarh, and you understand how the research of an architect can define the facades and can define the DNA of a city. Of Niemeyer in Brazil, of course, with his organic lines, can define a city that represents the political base for a country. And I have a dream some years ago in 2009 to design a new city in Honduras, because I hear that they wanted to create a new economical zone to boost the investment in a poor country in Central America. So I developed this city in New York with a partner, Bureau Happold, and was the idea to create a low-cost city that doesn't require huge amount of investment, but that can be built with relatively low-cost technologies, and was an economical zone that invite investors to invest in the country. I also work in the border between Mexico and the United States in a research called Hyperborder. That is the most relevant data of the border between Mexico and the United States. And I designed a city between these two countries that aim to try to create extraordinary social example of how you can integrate the countries in a more efficient way. But finally, some months ago, I met a visionary leader of Central America, the President Bukele, whose first public image in the United Nations was a selfie before speaking to the people, because he thought that more people are going to see the image than rather of really listening to his speech. And he's somebody that has extraordinary sensibility for social media, but also a capacity and a vision to really change a country. And he asked me if I can change the concept of Honduras city in a new city. And I, of course, thought if I have changed the design of the concert hall Casa de Música that I designed with Foster in the 90s, of course I can redesign a city based on Bitcoin. So in 2 weeks, we worked with his team and we redesigned Honduras city in Bitcoin City. And he presented in El Salvador in the Bitcoin conference. And the whole concept is that the values of Bitcoin, that are the values of transparency, protected rights, privacy, security, decentralized, powered by the people, and the value of motivation, they're also present in the city. It's extraordinary to talk about Bitcoin in Switzerland, of course, because of being Switzerland an epicenter of finance, of course. And of course, the value of the cities are in a way connected with those ambitions of Bitcoin, to be an inclusive space, to have a fair platform, to be healthy, sustainable, decentralized, accessible, and equitable. An image of the city. And in the center of the city, we'll have a museum that I will show in a moment, but not the type of museum I designed in Mexico City that is a container for a collection of art that mainly has pieces of Auguste Rodin, but is mainly to celebrate the technology of Bitcoin. I have been obsessed with the idea of creating spaces, but of course, to celebrate that technology is not about doing a form like this one. There is a museum, Sumaya, in Mexico City, the most visited private museum in the world, that became, of course, a destination due to Instagram, because everybody just wants to go and make pictures of the building. But in this case, we are celebrating a technology that would change the world. So we wanted to have a plaza in the center of the city, and we wanted to build the city gradually on parallel of how Bitcoin has been mined over the last years. This is an animation where you see on the left the evolution of the city, and on the right the evolution of the city, and on the left the evolution of mining over the next century. At the center we have this plaza, and the plaza, we wanted to do something that in a way connects with the history of architecture, so we wanted to carve a building. So we carved the V of Bitcoin to create a sunken courtyard. And it's not the first logo, not the third logo. We carved the second logo, that is the image of the coin. That is the abstraction of a digital currency. I see some faces of surprise here. And of course, we are in Switzerland. It makes all the sense that people are surprised that somebody wants to create a building, a president, not myself, want to create a building to celebrate this technology. We have parking all around the space, and basically it's the epicenter of the city, in which on the plaza of this courtyard, you have only one name, the name of the creator, that is Satoshi Nakamoto, that, as you know, is an anonymous name, somebody that nobody knows who really is. But it's this feeling of having a space where you celebrate something that came to change the world, where you will have in the walls scripted some of the most important moments of this disruptive technology. We have a very compact, efficient museum organized in 2 floor plans in which you will understand the evolution of the history of money. A simple museum, almost like a box, where you can understand how we start to exchange grains, animals, gold, coins, cards, until we arrive to this disruptive technology that at the end is about energy. A lot have said about Bitcoin, about how expensive it is or how bad it is for the environment. But actually, Salvador is mining with the energy of volcanoes, with the energy of the earth. And this museum is the opportunity to show the leadership of this president and this country in terms of Bitcoin, because it's the first country that has adopted Bitcoin as a legal currency. And for those who don't really understand or like Bitcoin, this is simply an interesting scheme to analyze. This is the evolution of the internet in the 90s, and is the adoption in which you can compare the speed of the adoption of crypto in the world. So that means that in the first 10 years, more than 150 million users in the world, and it's basically the two fastest adoptions of technology in the civilization. And just as an example, when I was a little kid, I take the phone and I call an operator who connects two cables to connect me with somebody else. And that's the way in which we're still sending money through countries. And why this is meaningful is not because of us in this room, but it's meaningful because a Mexican washing dishes in the United States is sending money to their relatives, and there are billions of dollars that are on the hands of the banks that can be on the hands of millions of people in the world that doesn't have money for their families or doesn't have any savings. So that's why this is meaningful. Bitcoin is only the tip of the iceberg. It's that thing at the top that people like or dislike, understood or not understood. But the reality is that this is a revolutionary technology that will change the world. It's the decentralized finance, smart contracts, and the blockchain offers an ecosystem that will change the world forever. So this is the center of the city. And basically, this is the curve of Bitcoin. It's the curve of the adoption. It's the value of Bitcoin over the next decade. And what is interesting that this is completely connected with the potential visitors to this museum. No? And an important aspect of the city is also to be a 15 minutes walking city. Basically, this is the diameter of the city, is the size of Manhattan. And basically, in order to develop a city that you can walk in 15 minutes, that is circular because it celebrates that technology, we work with Borough Hopwood in New York also to try to do the perfect city in terms of mixed-use program. And by doing that, we organize, first understanding the topography of the land, then we organize different epicenters, and each of these epicenters have the components of mixed programs that enables you to have a walkable city, an enjoyable place with mixed-use floor plans. Because my time is finished, I want to end up with this. I want to thank you all for your patience for seeing this lecture. And it has been a pleasure to be here in this presentation. Thank you. Thank you. 15 minutes.
Thank you. 50 minutes city, 50 minutes keynote. Thank you, Fernando. Complete different scale, we heard. That's the aim of this 3 contribution. We will end the keynote lectures with Grafton architects Shelley McNamara, who co-founded Grafton in '78 with Yvonne Farrell together. They taught at the EPFL in Lausanne from 10 to 11. That's the relation to Switzerland. Also, they taught at GSD, Harvard, and Yale. And currently, they are professors at the Accademia di Architettura in Mendrisio. In 2018, Yvonne Farrell and Shelley McNamara were the curators of the Venice Architectural Biennale. Their manifesto was Free Space. After they won 2020 the RIBA Gold Medal, Shelley and Yvonne have been selected for the Pritzker Prize in 2020. Just a few weeks ago, or not even a few, they won the 2020 European Union Prize for Contemporary Architecture, the Mies van der Rohe Awards for their townhouse Kingston University project in London. Most of their projects are won by international competitions. And last but not least, actually yesterday, they were announced as the winner of the new University Quarter Dreispitz in Münchenstein. and that will lay out the base for a rich mix of uses, including places for living, a place where two important universities of Basel and the region will take place, the Department of Law and Economics. Also a place where a circus school comes as a social and cultural catalyst. They kept and extended industrial structures and wove them into a new mix, into a new quarter for the city, a collage of old and new, of the formal and informal. Please welcome Shelley from Dublin. Because of a corona infection, they could not come to Basel, but thanks, Shelley, that you're still talking to us, and we are very pleased to have you here live in our space. Shelley, please, your time.
Thank you, Christian, for this nice introduction, and it was fascinating to see the two previous speakers. We paired, sorry, maybe you could go back to the first image, Patrick. I think, no, we had an introductory image. Don't worry, the very first image. Okay, it's gone. What we did was we paired free space with real space. There you are. Sorry, I can only see half the screen. And we thought this was interesting in terms of looking at both terms in architecture. And when we did the Venice Biennale in 2018, one of the responses to the theme of free space was from Raphael Maneo, and I think it relates to your theme today to do with real space and public space. And what he says is the perception of free space appears when a building's condition as an artifact gives way and space is left as a sensorial expression of freedom. We thought that was a beautiful interpretation of free space. And the term real space and reality in a way brings up the ongoing dilemma of practicing architecture, that connection between the real world and the imagined world. And in our language, our more or less old ancient language, the Irish language, there are hundreds of words for the dream world. The dream world and the real world are intertwined, and the boundaries are blurred between the two. And in a way, that is the condition of being an architect. So this is my response to your theme as an initial comment. And then the next image, Patrick. So I'm going to make this presentation in two parts. The first relates to, let's say, the role of the university in the making of free space and real space. And I'm going to show you a number of universities which we've been lucky enough to be involved in. And this is because also the Dry Spits competition, which we were delighted to be involved in and to win one part of it, is a new university quarter. And the challenge or question when we were doing this competition in collaboration with Christian Blaser Architects, as well as Westpol and Urban Systems Strategy, the key question was, what is the role of the university of the future? And just to go through this university in Lima in Peru, which is a university of engineering, the way we see this relating to free space or real space or relating to climate and context is the fact that we made this building into what we called an arena for learning, an open, porous structure, a kind of scaffold system within which the university can happen. And the image on the right of the fog we found extraordinary. And this is no ordinary fog from our experience, the thing about this fog is that it hurts your eyes because it refracts light, because it's the meeting of the hot and cold currents up and down the Pacific, so that Lima disappears under this fog. So there was a very particular need to respond to the climate and the culture of this place. It's a very moderate climate, and the nose of this building faces the Pacific. So everything is external except the teaching spaces. Next image. So we made this porous structure, as I say, infrastructure, facing north towards the sun, leaning towards the north to protect from the sun. It's a vertical university. It's a seismic country. It has stacked laboratories and classrooms and libraries on one side, facing a beautiful residential quarter, and it has this vertiginous space facing what is a hostile motorway. And in a way, this project envelops a number of the values that we pursue, which is that thing of what Alejandro de la Sota calls, or what he suggests, that architects should make as much nothing as possible. And in our experience, in our work, that is the role of architecture. It's the additional space that you make, that space which is the cartilage and holds everything together. It's the void, what de la Sota calls the nothing. And here this void is this vertical nave-like space, which is kind of extraordinary and surprised even us, because it's you can't see the sky. The building looks like it's porous on the outside, but feels like a cave on the inside. So it's very much about climate, about the culture of Lima being about an external life, living on the outside because of its climate. There's no rain, there's no insulation. And for us as Irish architects, that was a kind of playground. And next image. Then we moved to Toulouse. The Lima University is a university of engineering, and it's full of laboratories and places to work. The university in Toulouse is a university of economics, as was our Bocconi building in Milan. Completely different climate and culture. And in terms of the kind of free space we wanted to make, or the real place, we looked at the scale of Toulouse, which is this tiny Roman city, where the biggest windows were to the sky, where you have all these internal courtyards with this beautiful window to the heavens. And we made a building which in some way reflects this, and made a central space which is open to the elements. And this little girl sitting, standing in the sunlight in Jacobin church in Toulouse, also describes the nature of the climate in Toulouse. Very hot in the summer, but all of the spaces semi-open. And that's something that's really, I think, important now to think about. At what point do we need internal space? When can tempered space be healthier, more pleasurable, more beautiful to move in, as is the monastic cloister, the tradition of the monastic cloister, which in our view is one of the most timeless spaces to be in, because you're moving, protected from wind and rain, but you're open to the sky. Next image. So we made this what we call a kind of inhabited sundial, which rotates around the central rooflit space. Everything is open. It's protected from wind and rain. And we took the elements of Toulouse, which are these cloisters and courtyards, and this cloister spirals up through the building to connect the students and the professors. It also makes an opening to the city, because again, the whole thing about how we place ourselves in the world, how we place ourselves in the world as students, as architects, we feel that this thing of the horizon and always knowing where you are and bringing the place or the city right into the heart of the building, which is what this central void, the charged void, which the Smithsons call it. Next image. And here we see the students having a conversation in this very small crack of space, but that it captures the world of Toulouse, which is a beautiful brick city, which is why we've used traditional brick, the Roman brick. We were building adjacent to a medieval wall and found a production agency where they make exactly the same bricks from the same earth, same dimensions. So we were able to make something which had a resonance with its location. Next image. And then we moved to the United States, to Arkansas. And it was interesting listening to Assemble speaking about their investigation of timber. And we won this project for an all-timber building. And again, what's interesting in relation to the role of the university, this is also a place of fabrication. Toulouse is an academic university. UTEC is research, laboratories, machine making university. And UTEC is a place where students would learn and understand the use of the local material, which is wood. We found this extraordinary building, which we didn't know before winning this competition, by Faye Jones, architect, the Thorncrown Chapel. And it's really interesting in terms of contemporary issues, where he made this beautiful church inspired by Sainte-Chapelle in Paris. And all the pieces of wood are such that they can be carried by one man through the forest. So it's constructed in a really economical and inventive way. And then on the other hand, we have the Ozark barns, the rudimentary kind of workman-like barns built by farmers. And we were between these kind of two worlds, let's say, and the wonderful image of this huge tree reminds us of the importance of materials, not just timber, but that one of the contemporary challenges is to use materials with respect. And our project was to make a kind of combination between the Ozark barn, you might say, and an academic building, which builds up to having a civic presence onto the public domain. Next image. Okay, do I have you back? I'm sorry, I got a little there for a moment. Hello? Hello?
Yes, we are back. We are back. Just continue.
Can you hear me?
Just continue.
All right. Okay, so just continue, Christian, as if nothing has happened. Okay, so what you see here is this big fabrication shop where students will learn about the local wood and how to use it, students of engineering and architecture, and how this roof builds up to being a public building on the public road, and how in terms of teaching that there's always a connection between the academic and the world of making. Next image. And one of the extraordinary things in terms of climate, one of the extraordinary things about Arkansas is their rainfall, which is throughout the whole year, and they have these huge deluges of rain. So the gutters were designed into the primary structure of the building. There are these canoe-shaped beams which collect the water and which deal with this thing of rainfall. Next image. So then we moved to London, to the London School of Economics and overlooking Lincoln's Inn Fields. And the challenge here, again, it's an academic university of professors and students, but the challenge here was to make a space which would release the university, the tight streets of the university, and make what we call a great hall, a place of gathering, a civic space, a free space, actually, and that would be open to all. And we used the Lincoln's Inn church, this beautiful undercroft space right next to the university, which supports a church up above and which is open on the ground floor. And we felt was a really beautiful reference. And the next image. And unlike Arkansas, let's say, but maybe similar to the Lima University, this is a vertical university where it has a range of spaces going from sport with this huge span on the ground floor, and the Great Hall on the basement level, then the Great Hall on the ground floor, 2 floors of lectures and 6 floors of research offices. So next image. We used the transfer structure between the sports hall and the upper floors as this weight-bearing construct which would support all the floors above. So instead of burying the transfer structure into the depth of a floor, we decided we would move through that space because we had to make this transfer from very large spans to small spans. So I suppose really what I'm saying is that structure and into this is woven landscape, structure, landscape, context, education, the making of a free space and real space is woven into these projects in very different ways. And next image. The university in London, the one we've run, the Mies van der Rohe Prize, is quite a different building to any other building we've done. It's called a townhouse. It's a space for students. It's not a space for professors. It's a place to welcome students, to make them feel at home. It's a very open structure. We call it a warehouse of ideas, and it's using the very classic, you could say, concrete frame construction. With large spans, with columns and beams, and we modulate everything in terms of the light and the air and the ventilation. But what is interesting about this, with the next image, about this university is we've used a loggia to make a civic space at the edge. And the next image, I think, will show the wraparound of the loggia. We were very influenced by Jørn Knudsen's furniture showroom in Copenhagen in the making of this project. And what's fantastic is that this brings dance and library together. It's first generation, third level students in many cases. It's has a very mixed demographic, and it has it activates and practices a duty of care to all of these students. What we really loved was the thing of bringing dance and library together, and rather than separating them, we decided to bring them right into one space. And it's incredible how the life of a building, that other disciplines infect or act as a catalyst to each other when you have the quiet and contemplative combined with the physical and the active. Next image. And then moving on to the streetscape and how the world of the citizen is invited. This building will be open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It has no barriers, no security. It's self-controlling. It has that sense of being open and welcoming. And in a way, the architecture stands back in this project. it stands back in order to allow the vision and the life of the building to flourish. The colonnade has stepped terraces with planting where students can sit outside and study, and so it opens the student up to the big horizon of the world. Next image. And setting a different scale as lead into the dry spits competition, we won a competition a number of years ago in Dublin for the cultural quarter in Dublin Port. And this was a new experience for us to be able to think about something at this scale. And the idea here was to make a connection between Dublin Port, to make a connection back to Dublin City. It has been disconnected, so walls are taken down, and the theatrical life of a busy port is revealed to the city. Next image. And what we found was that dealing with these structures was like dealing with a kind of geology, and that it really meant that that all typologies were challenged, because nothing was normal. You had these huge concrete structures, these big steel silos, and we found ourselves completely liberated by this, that we could occupy spaces that we would never think of making with new uses, which I think was a lead-in to dry spits, which is the next image. And the dry spit project was very challenging, and the collaboration with the Westball and Blazer Architects and Urban Systems Design was fantastic. And what we felt about dry spits is that it's a place that's waiting for something new to happen. It's full of potential, and our role was not as building designers of buildings, but as a way of making an urban strategy to find a way of setting the scene, let's say, is what we called it, to set the scene for radical reuse of this place. Next image. So as Christian said, we responded to the fragments of dry spits. And what we found really interesting and really refreshing is the informality of the place. The fact that there were improvised restaurants and spaces, that young people were taking over places for places to work, that it had this informal kind of fragmented quality, but that it also has what many cities have lost, which is space for the unexpected, perhaps, to come together and to make a different kind of dynamic to what was there before in dry spits, and also to what possibly exists in other parts of Basel. Next image. So one of the things that we were requested was to address the climate of dry spits, because the wind doesn't move through this place. It's a gravel platform overlooking the city. It has all these disused railway lines, which are fascinating. And we started to think about a new landscape, which would feel like a river, that it would be like a river of landscape flowing through these disused railway lines, almost like the Rhine feels like in Basel. Next image. And this landscape really was the driving force in terms of how we might think about how you grow a place, how you grow a community, how you grow a landscape. And we use the term, or Westball used the term, a pioneering landscape, because it's gravel. It's not the same as other parts of Basel, so it's quite unique. And what you're looking at here is a model of an existing car park structure, which is a low structure about 200 meters long, which we used as part of the circus center. We were really delighted with this idea of circus and law and economics being in proximity one to the other, combined with living, combined with library, combined with shopping and neighborhood facilities. And we found that the let's say the climate of the brief was very progressive, that it was open enough for interpretation and was really demanding in terms of how do you make a new place and how do you make a university of the future. One of the things we were really pleased about the big one of the bigger buildings we kept is that we could fit a big university garden on the roof. I can't point to it now, but it's just beside where it says Helsinki Strasse, and that's 20 meters above ground. So again, a bit like the Dublin Port experience, it liberated you into areas and doing things you might not normally do if you were designing from scratch. Next image. And so this collage of new and old, let's say, was translated into thinking about different kinds of materials, and should this be a white, really clean place, or should it be a mixture of wood, which exists there, of prefabricated concrete or stone, or that somehow we would anticipate that it would be designed by different architects and would have a different hand, but that the strategy could hold, and that informal collage that exists in dry spits wouldn't be cleaned up and wouldn't disappear. Next image. I think I'm over time, so I'll just go through. So we have the university occupying a big concrete warehouse. We have new buildings which float above. We have apartment buildings, people living over a university. If we go to the next image, all of the way of moving through this place is external or semi-external, horizontally or vertically. You're always connected with the garden, with natural light, with fresh air. Next image. It makes civic spaces. The last image we saw was the University Platz. This is the new building floating over an existing building, and the funny vaulted roof is the car park structure where we've made bicycles on top of the circus school and they can access the library. So there's this lovely dynamic which the place allowed us to develop in terms of the section and ways of moving. Next image. The circus center, which enlivens on Frankfurtstrasse and makes a new civic space and acts as a social magnet for this place. Next image. And again, just looking, this is a fantastic track, a railway track that goes beside the concrete existing structure on the left and the steel structure on the right. And it's a sunken space. Is the railway line is still there. So this is a new alley which moves, a new path which moves between the circus school on the right-hand side and the academic world on the left. And that's something that I think is really important in terms of our world has become too compartmentalized. We've become very isolated from each other, and this possibility of bringing things together is a real opportunity now. Next image. And if I can ask Patrick to just go through the last two images, because I know I'm over time. I'm just finishing with this, which I didn't intend, but there's something I found amazing about looking recently over these drawings again of the Stockholm exhibition designed by Asplund and Leverance doing a floating dance floor, which I had never seen before. And the next image. I just want to finally finish with something that Alvar Aalto said in relation to this exhibition and feels to me very current, where he says, the Stockholm exhibition has been clad in an architectural language of pure and unconstrained joy. There is a festive refinement, but also a childish lack of restraint to the whole. Asplund's architecture explodes all the boundaries. The purpose is a celebration with no preconceived notions as to whether it should be achieved with architectural or other means. It's not a composition in stone, glass, and steel, but rather a composition in houses, flags, searchlights, flowers, fireworks, happy people, and clean tablecloths. And for me, as a friend of the exhibition, it is a great satisfaction that Gunnar Asplund, with this denial of architecture, inverted commas, has hit the target and shown others a way of thinking which hasn't previously led architecture to any triumphs. Even the gentleman who is used to finding satisfaction in traditional architectural beauty, where historical study and a good cultural drill have helped him get oriented, will perhaps gradually find some reason for a whole new kind of joy as he walks around the Stockholm exhibition, where, for instance, blooming tulips in the garden have received the same care from the architects as the buildings and the exhibition hall interiors. I thought that was a good note to end on, a note of joy and optimism. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Shelley. We are looking for real free space also in Basel. And now, please come to the stage. I want to introduce you Judith Scholz, that is also an architect and since many years is moderating our panel. She is also the chief editor. You know her from Tech 21. Thank you, Marie, Amy, and Maria, Fernando, and Shelley. And let's see what Judith makes out of material space, of Bitcoin space, and free space. Thanks that you do that. Judith.
Well, thank you, Christian. Yes, good evening. I'm very happy to moderate this panel because there are so many topics. Well, we have heard new perspectives for a sustainable future. That's the theme of this fair. And we are talking about real spaces and indeed, new perspectives are needed. They are necessary to cope with the global challenges humanity is confronted with. It has been said several times. I just try to summarize. We have demographic change. The world population is growing. There are 8 billion of us right now. In one generation, in 30 years, there will be 2 billion more. All these people will need living spaces, housing, infrastructure, green spaces in a high quality. We have migration. We have also heard about it. This will become even more acute and more dramatic due to this growth of the global population and also of climate change. We have urbanization and densification. More than half of the world's population lives in cities now. In 30 years, this share will be 2/3. So we also need a densification in a high quality of our settlements because we need the land to feed all those people. We have the climate change, which is man-made and which has devastating consequences. Most countries from all over the world have ratified the Paris Climate Agreement and committed to reduce their carbon emissions by 2050 to zero carbon. But this also needs, this also has an impact on the building industry and on the planning industry. And more generally, we have the need for a sustainable development. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was adopted by all United Nations member states in 2050. We all know these 17 Sustainable Development Goals, SDG. Most of them also have an impact on the building industry and on the planning. So we need a new focus. We need a change of values among all stakeholders, and especially architects, urban planners, and building technicians can make a great contribution. But we have to get new mindsets. We have to leave our familiar path. We have to look for different solutions. And not only in a formal way, but also in social, cultural, economic aspects. We need to understand what people want and what will be acquired. So we need to understand the forces and the mechanisms that shape our world, and we need to talk about processes and strategies. We have heard these words several times today because they are really important in this context. And I would like to start with the theme of transformation and participation. We have seen we just can't afford, for different reasons, economical, social, ecological reasons, we just can't afford to build everything new. We have to transform what we have. We have to work with what we have. And this means, of course, the built environment, but this also means the population that's already there. So the local resources, which are also the minds of all those people living there. So participation, more than tabula rasa procedures. And participations, those are quite new processes. The question is, who should moderate those and who brings the necessary skills? And here I just would like to ask Amy and Maria, because you have a great experience with this, and I mean, you are architects. Where did you learn how to moderate these processes? Where did you get those skills? What can we do to imitate you and to learn from you?
Oh God, please don't imitate us. We're just trying to figure it out. Well, I'm going to try and begin to answer the question. I think I feel like we were quite lucky at university. The way that we learn architecture, it was always about learning from people, like whether that's the teachers or the engineer at the university, or it's about you know, if we have a hypothetical site, going there and trying to document what is already there, and then speaking to whoever we can speak to about their experience. So I think it's something that is actually ingrained in a lot of architecture programs in the UK anyway. It's just about, I guess, how do you take that philosophy into the real world? And I don't think it's anything radical. I just think maybe the way that we were set up in the beginning, in a very informal way. You know, we had full-time jobs in other practices, but we had kind of free time, free space to kind of experiment and try things out, and it wasn't pressured and it wasn't focused on earning kind of salaries for a whole office. And I think in that space we were able to carry on those practices. And some people in Assemble are more interested in kind of participation through dialogue with people. Some people are interested in participation in a way that they learn hands-on skills with craftspeople. There's just different ways, I think, that we participate, or whatever, learn from other people. And we're still kind of figuring out how to scale those things up in bigger projects. And yeah, it's a process, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think, as Maria said, I think what we share maybe as a value is this idea of architecture as a collaborative process, whether that is with experts or engineers or other people in the kind of building field, whether that's financial or political, but not to undermine the fact that architects do also have design skills in their own rights, and to not kind of undermine that by saying that everybody should be designing everything, but appreciating the different people's perspectives and opinions within that design process. So I also think participation can be done really badly and really half-heartedly, and I think it's been a learning process for us too. But maybe an example of something we're trying to do in the EPFL course this semester is try and kind of demystify that a bit just by actually doing the participation. So taking the students to the place where we're working with and getting them to interact with the what would be the potential clients or people living in this cooperative housing by, well, one of the tasks was to draw them an image and gift it to them. And in that process, you have to learn what this person likes, what they want in their house, and how they live as a way of kind of understanding what they might want to, how they might want to live in this place that you're designing. So you're not kind of talking about a participative process, you're actually trying to do it while you're in university, so trying to learn these skills.
Mm-hmm. So it's of course you have your expertise. Architects, planners do have their expertise, but they open it also to impulses from other disciplines and also from future users or from the people who are already there. You use the words free space, which is very interesting because Shelley also talked a lot about free space, more in a special way, and in you it was an intellectual way, but of course it's always both for both of you. So it's quite interesting. I would just also encourage you in the public to ask questions if you have some, because we are discussing here, but of course you are also invited. I would just like to ask you, Fernando, you also have a very interdisciplinary approach. You also have a very broad view on the projects and also on processes, but in a completely different way. You have much more affinity to digital themes, so you actually need, in your projects, the digital space and the real space kind of overlap. And what does that mean for the design process?
Well, I always believe that architecture is a design process in which you translate the society. In the best of the cases, that the buildings need to be the result of a specific historical time. So when you see the Eiffel Tower, that represents France, 18th century, the production of steel, that technology at that time. And I think buildings, in the best of the cases, most represent the time in which they are made. So I just have that in the process. So when we develop a project, we are not depending on a specific form, but we try to translate a program, and then we try to understand if the site has information that can lead us to define that form. But I'm not interested in form by creating form by itself. I'm interested that the building is connected with a place and with a specific time.
Mm. So this, all this virtual and digital topic is one aspect of the cultural background that you translate into a physical form.
Yeah, like now I think everybody's talking about this metaverse, no? And I think that's probably something to address in this conversation. It's like many architects in the world are spending a lot of time in building virtual spaces for the metaverse, right? But at the end, architecture is what ends up to be built. And I think architecture is a service for society. So I think I'm more interested in the traditional aspect of architecture, in which you can actually solve a social problem and create something that can help society to improve or develop, right?
Mm-hmm. Shelley, I would like to ask you a question. About, you said about the universities. I think the camera is there. I have to speak there, but I see you here, so it's a little bit confusing. Anyway, you said that you tried to get the city space into the building in those different university buildings that you were designing. So you talked about the void that was needed inside the building, and in South America it was also a climatic need because it was so hot. So you needed to protect this free space from the sun. In other locations, it was really a civic space, a public space. So this need to get the city into the building, is it also because in the cities themselves there are less really open spaces, really public spaces than they used to be?
Well, that is the case, that public space is being reduced over time, and that's something we have to correct. I suppose it's also thinking about city as a phenomenon, which we all learned so much about during COVID, how much we need and want to be together, to learn, to understand, to socialize. And particularly in relation to education, that it's not an easy time for students, and it makes it more difficult if they feel isolated and caught up in their own world. And there's something about being released into the bigger world, intellectually and physically. And I think that's why compartmentalization of education is not a healthy thing. That there's nothing more wonderful than coming across, let's say in the case of Kingston, a sweaty dancer that an intellectual meets on the way to his or her place of study, that there's something about that proximity of unexpected uses, which is part of the joy of city, that thing you see on the street as you go for your coffee in the morning, the unexpected experiences, the images that are revealed during all of our day when we're experiencing city. And it's one of the most wonderful things about city is that there's that feeling of being part of a bigger community. And the more that's reduced, the less rich our lives become. And it's interesting listening to Amy and Maria talking about education and collaboration. There's also the thing of architecture being such a collaborative process, and Fernando also referred to this. And one of the things that I think, it's not directly related to your question, but I was reminded of it when Amy and Maria were speaking about their education, is that we think that one of the biggest challenges now is not just to bring people together, which that is one of, but to somehow empower people to be able to take some control of their own lives, and especially young students. And I think that's what Assemble has done. It has shown young architects that there's more than one way of practicing architecture, that you can go and make things big and small, that you can research and experiment and make beautiful things for people to touch, to inhabit. And they spoke about the tiled floor that they did in Venice, and it's just so beautiful to make a beautiful floor. And sometimes making a beautiful floor is making a real place or a free space or a piece of city, because so many of our cities are made of bits and pieces of beautiful floors, whether they're inside or outside. And so that tactile thing is so important. And I think what's brilliant is when people start to understand that maybe we can make something at the scale of the community, at the scale of the group. I know there's the bigger issues and the bigger powers, but that somehow that there's that optimism to take charge or take control or take the rein in relation to your own life, whether it's an architect, a builder, whatever. So that's what you call an unfocused answer to a very focused question.
Yes, I mean, you touched several topics there, but I think the answer is very focused all the same, because actually it touches another point that you wrote, Assemble wrote once. We make things and we make things happen. So actually it's exactly both. You build things and you make things possible. You give a frame, actually. So it's, yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, but this is the role of architecture. I mean, it's to make a frame in which things can happen, and also to work with the. I mean, it's also a question of identity. So, in order to make a building or an urban space work, people have to identify with it. And of course, in this context, one strategy is to keep parts of the existing and to transform it in something new, but which is still people still can recognize as what they know. So actually, it's a transfer or a transformation more than a tabula rasa idea. And actually, that's what you are doing also in Basel, Shelley. That's the idea, actually.
And I'm very curious about Fernando because he's changing the world.
Yes.
What? No, I have been just admiring. I am really enjoying and contemplating the way in which you express your ideas and your slides. So I have been very touched to see how you present the work. Congratulations.
I'm sorry I can't have dinner with you. I presume Christian will take you all to dinner and find out how to change the world. You know, it's just amazing to see the different scale of thinking, which, yeah, you're in a different lane, so to speak.
Well, I was very touched to see your work and how you explain your ideas. I was really fascinated. I made many slides of your presentation because I was very impressed of your way to think, and I was very touched to see how you share the ideas and how you see the public space and how you engage your buildings with the city.
Yes.
Congratulations for your project in Basel, by the way.
Yeah, we're very sad that you can't be here. We were looking forward to dinner with you as well.
Yeah, that is true, but at least we have this digital chance to communicate and to speak. And I think that, of course, there are huge differences in the approaches and in the views on the world, but that's what makes the debate so interesting, because there are also parallels. I mean, this aim for quality, this need for an interdisciplinary approach, the need to understand social processes, social needs, and to translate them. I mean, this is what brings us together. Actually, this is what makes an architect's heart beat. and yes, then the methods are quite different. The results are quite different, but the aims are very comparable, I think.
Yep.
I would like to ask once again, who has a question? Who wants to join the discussion? I mean, yes, you don't always have the chance to talk with so many experts. Please speak into the microphone so that we also can hear you. Yeah?
You can hear me?
Yes.
Well, firstly, thank you so much for your inspiring lectures. I have a total echo, but is that okay? Okay, I'm fine. I have a question for Fernando, since you seem to be the man changing the world. No. But in a way, maybe in your lecture, you sort of did mention as a singular author planning and creating a new city. I know the scale in Switzerland is quite different, but or maybe I misunderstood, so that's why it's a question. And just in the beginning, you also mentioned that you don't necessarily believe that kind of architecture should react to a certain form or be formal. I think isn't that what you're more or less saying? So, but in the lecture, I understood that actually the Bitcoin city, in a way, maybe theoretically, but also formally, literally formally, emerges from the idea of the Bitcoin. No, we even saw squares that, I know it's abstract, but it represented Bitcoin. It had the name of the mysterious kind of founder. So I thought if you could again explain the relationship sort of the two maybe contradictory ideas, or maybe I misunderstood you.
I tried to reply in the simplest way possible, but I went to visit that president because he wanted to do a new airport. And when I was with him, I showed him that I have been working in airports, that I have great teams of consultants from Holland. And he said to me the first meeting, I'm not only trying to do a new airport to develop the south of the country, but I have a bigger vision. I want to do a new city. So let me think about it. And he called me 2 weeks later and say, you know what, that idea you have developed for Honduras, that's what I want to do. I want to do that same idea of a free zone. Can you adapt it to Bitcoin? Because he has been one of the most successful Bitcoin enthusiasts in the world, as he legalized Bitcoin for the first country. So I say, of course. So in 2 weeks, we have transformed a concept that I have done before for Honduras, a new city, in Beacon City. And of course now, after we visit the site next to a volcano and between the beautiful Gulf of Fonseca, where you have other 2 countries, we realize his vision is really a sustainable future for the south of the country. And we are now developing the new airport for him that I was going to show, but it was too short at the time. But it's interesting that he sees, and leaders have that capacity, especially in these small countries, that somebody like him can say, okay, let's do infrastructure that is not a cheap, bad infrastructure, but with great consultants, a nice piece of engineering that represents the gate to the country, to develop the country. So the South is very rich in natural resources, but very poor, socially speaking. So the whole concept is, let's do a new city. And because his vision for Beacon is so central in the development of the country, the name of the city is Beacon City. And we want to align some of the values of Beacon to this new urban development. And of course, now is a moment in civilization where we are questioning everything, how we build, how we reuse material, how we connect with the people, how we work from home. So this is an opportunity to rethink how we plan a new city. So we are collaborating with a multidisciplinary team from engineers, thinkers, planners, to develop this new city that will become the epicenter of the development of the south of El Salvador. So that's roughly the idea. So we are working, and that's, of course, the best it can happen as a client is to try to find a client that has a vision, right? And that trusts that you can work with engineers and thinkers and creative people to develop something that can help to develop the country. No? Thank you.
Quite an experiment, actually.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. We have the chance for a very last question. Yes, very last question.
Hello. Thank you very much for the inspirational talks. I have a question for Fernando. And also maybe this is an invitation for Shelley to join in with the same topic slightly, but I'll try and keep it quick. You both designed very differently in terms of the idea of the void space, or let's say the space that's in between. And Fernando, we saw an image of something in terms of the history of architecture, in terms of extraction, so designing in the negative, let's say. And then we saw an image of the Bitcoin kind of formed architecture. And I just wondered how that idea of extraction then comes in, and how that may affect human experience, where a more superimposed level of extraction begins to take place. So the negative is coming from a different idea, let's say, from a more ambiguous sense of void space.
Well, Shelley has disappeared, so you have to answer.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to think that some of the most powerful moments on the history of architecture, they are voids. They're really spaces contained by structures, but at the end, humans are touched by the experience of a space, right? So at the end, the essence of architecture is to design spaces that are functional, right? And in the case of the Bitcoin Museum, it's completely different of doing a freestanding structure that you try to translate a collection, for example, as a freestanding museum. But it's the challenge of how you do something that it's the continuity of something that has been built by the people, because Bitcoin exists thanks to the people. So it offers a beautiful opportunity to do something in which almost the designer is almost invisible. We are simply abstracting the Bitcoin logo, the Bitcoin coin, and then creating that void. And that void basically is a moment in which you have a courtyard. And courtyards in the history of civilization has been open spaces where you have a moment to reflect. So it makes sense to try to do something that is carved, because also historically in the earth, you have thousands of very prehispanic old structures. The first architectural spaces built by humans are carved in nature. So that's why this brings that notion that this is a technology that will came to change the world forever. No? And it's not necessarily Bitcoin, it's the blockchain, and it's all what is going to happen after this. So it's an opportunity to do something which you are not necessarily interested in doing a formal protagonism, but simply to become almost like a doctor, that you want to do a service, you want to translate something, right? Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's quite an elegant conclusion, actually. I would just add 2 words, because I'm very impressed. I mean, we have seen, we always talk about it. It's really a big topic that we need a sustainable built environment, and of course a real built environment, real spaces that are inclusive, that are functional, livable, ecological, resilient, and that are beautiful, because we want to love them. And in order to make this real, we need new ideas, new methods, new processes, new partners, new skills, new processes, approaches. So we have to take people's needs seriously. Some of these needs are very old, some of these needs are quite new. And in order to give these needs place in the truest sense of the word, experts are still needed. So you have said it very clearly. We have our expertise, we have to use it, but our roles are slightly changing. And today, thanks to our guests, we have heard many reasons to see this change as a wonderful chance for our professions. And I hope that you feel as inspired and as I'm motivated as I do. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for your contributions. Goodbye. And I give the stage back to our host, Christian Blaser.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. This is all recorded. You know, if you want to see it again or tell friends, it was very pleasing and enriching. We are looking forward to see you next week on the Architekturwoche Basel, starting on Monday, for example, at 6 p.m. with a prologue event on Reale Räume within the exhibition Earth on Limit with Vera Sacchetti and Jan Böhlen from the Design and Research Lab Atelier Luma, where you both are involved, and they will be in a talk. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you all architects for sharing with us, and for the hardcore people that stayed and take off next week. Come to the Architecture Week. It will change you forever and our city, and that's what we hope. Look for this kind of graphic. It will be everywhere, and we are looking forward and see you again in this format in 2 years. Thanks a lot, and have a nice evening. Thank you.